All right, welcome back into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's that time of week. Let's catch up with our guy, Mike LaTulip, Illini Inquirer basketball analyst. And Mike, not much to take away, it feels like, in the positives when it comes to a 70-59 loss at Rutgers. And that score is closer than the game actually was. Rutgers almost got to a 30-point lead at one point there early in the second half. Kofi Coburn with 20 and 10, RJ Melendez with another 10 points, a lot of late points again for RJ, but continues to show flashes. But the shooting is off. Illinois out-rebounded in this one, 46-28. That's been a concerning issue here. I don't know if there's much to break down from this game, though, Mike. You got outplayed by one of the hottest teams, one of the toughest teams in the Big Ten. So I'll just leave the floor open for you. Like, what are your thoughts as that game just gets away from Illinois really quickly?
Well, you mentioned it, right? It's a good team. It's arguably the toughest, if not one of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten. And I understand all that. Illinois knows that going into it. Everyone knows that going into it. But I think there's just a certain effort that you have to play with, a certain resolve. And they didn't have it. And when you mix that with the missed shots, and not only just the missed shots, the hesitation on some shots that lead to poorer shots, it can spiral out of control. The weird part about the first half was it was not going well at all, but you look and you're like, you're down 7. You're right there. But letting them start 7 for 9 from the field at home, big crowd, it's hard. It's hard to make a comeback in those types of scenarios. And the other thing too is there were a lot of opportunities. I thought, it was 24-15, make a great defensive play, come down. Plummer misses a wide open 3 that makes it 24-18. He hit the same type of 3 in Bloomington, to cut it to 4. And you think, you make that shot and maybe they tighten up a little bit. They just, until they were down 7 or up 17 and had to deal with this press, Rutgers didn't look tight the entire game. And part of that is just the start to the game where you let them get a couple easy baskets and get going. But we can dive into the shots and the effort and everything. But, there's a certain type of effort that's required on the road. There's a certain type of toughness that's required on the road. And there's a certain type of, toughness and effort that's required to win a Big Ten championship here in the regular season. And fortunate because you're still in a position to do that. You didn't make it any easier on yourself up there in Piscataway, but, a lot that you can certainly learn from and take from this game. But, man, Underwood mentioned it last night. He can't make shots for them. And there's a certain toughness element. We talk about toughness with rebounding and 50-50 balls. Oh, there's a toughness to shooting. There is. In stepping in and being confident and not passing up shots. And I'll make this point quickly about the Rutgers defense. Especially in the first, it was outstanding. I mean, it was, they locked them up in the first half. And I think what you make the mistake of, and, when you get out in transition, part of it is you need to get stops to get out in transition, but even secondary transition, if you have an early look, clean look, if you're Trent Frazier, if you're Jacob Grandison, if you're DeMonte Williams, get it up. And it doesn't need to be rushed. It doesn't need to be, maybe if it's after a post touch, great. But this isn't the type of team where you keep searching for a better shot. Odds are they're going to keep leading you to the end of the shot clock and you're going to throw up an even worse one. So we'll break that down in the film. But yeah, it's a toughness thing and it's a rebounding thing. And, the rebounding numbers, 18, you've missed a lot of threes, that can happen. But there were just some effort plays and focus plays that, this team and the coaching staff for sure will get rectified with these guys.
Mike, we know there can be ebbs and flows of a season. Last year was that way. This year certainly has been that way. I mean, December through early January, they played great. Then they go on that run where they beat Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Indiana, where I think everyone felt pretty confident. Last 3 games, though, certainly have been one of those, ebbs, right? Like where it's not going very, very well. Purdue second half, Northwestern second half, Rutgers basically the entire game. And part of that's shooting, right? I mean, Grandison the last 3, 2 for 13 from 3, Trent Frazier 4 for 15 from 3, DeMonte Williams 3 for 14 from 3. But is there anything else that you're concerned about rather than just making open shots? Like Is there something bigger that is a bigger picture concern for this team than maybe just a shooting slump?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can see it. And it typically comes in the form of guys passing up looks where they may not be as confident. Where, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, it felt like a lot of those guys, the second they had a sliver of daylight, it was going up and they were shooting it confidently. And that's the biggest difference that I see just from a perimeter shooting standpoint. But also, I think these defenses are finding a way to try to find a balance with Kofi and these outside shooters. You can even tell with the Rutgers defenders, like they're still very aware of guys like Alfonso Plummer and Jacob Grandison, even despite the slumps. They're very aware, and they kind of stay hugged him. It's part of the reason why Kofi can go out there and score 20 and 10. But I think the rebounding is the biggest issue. For as good of a rebounding team as this team has been, as they are, just the effort stuff on the glass, a lot of watching. That's kind of that's the most concerning thing to me. But I think as you move forward, you can't let this season. I know there's been a lot of guys in and out of the lineup, illnesses, injuries. You can't stumble into March. Is basically what I'm saying. You need to find a way to hit your apex, and if that's not making shots, because not every team's going to do that, then there can't just be this massive contrast between this is what they look like when they make shots and this is what they look like when they miss shots, specifically on the defensive end and on the glass. Yeah. That stuff, that's why Underwood always says, right? Defense and rebounding travel. That's what comes on the road with you. You may not always make shots. So when you can't check all three of those boxes, it's almost impossible to win on the road. And I think the other thing that I'll mention too, when you look at kind of the irony of them going into East Lansing, was the game in East Lansing last year on February 23rd that handed them their fourth conference loss, like last night, was very similar to that game in a way. It got a little sloppy. I know Io gets hit in the face, but there was a toughness element to it, stepping up and knocking down shots and some costly turnovers. But they turned it around after that Michigan State game. I know their next game was against Nebraska after that, but they still went on after that to play Michigan and play Ohio State. That's 2 games later was or 3 games later is when they beat Michigan on their home floor by 23. So this team has done this, and without Io, I'll mention. So it's not like this is just but they had Io last year. In that game in Michigan, they didn't. So digging deep and just finding it, and you can sit here and try to dissect things and analyze and overanalyze this. When it comes down to it, it's pretty simple. And the more these guys can simplify those things for themselves, I think the better.
Yeah, out rebounded in 7 of the last 9 games. Like, you did not expect that out of this team. When Kofi, right, his last 6 games has 48 defensive rebounds. Like, he's doing his job on the glass. He needs some help right now, and a lot of that. I mean, remember how many rebounds Andres Felice used to get at 6'2"? Like that, those are the boards they need right now, and they're just not getting. Plus, they need to force some more misses and miss fewer of their own. Let me ask you, as a shooter, Mike, I think you've talked about this before. What is a shooting slump like? Like, how hard is it to get out of? How much are you thinking about it?
I as much as any player would want to tell you that they don't think about it, they do. And it just becomes kind of this elephant in the room for your own game. And I've made the comment on this podcast before. When I went to Wright State, I started off the season, honestly, pretty similar to Jacob Grandison. I think I was 20 games into the year, 21 games. I was 53%, 53%. And then this 5 for 27 stretch happened for me. And it's like, you don't notice it those first couple games. You're like, and then I had like a 1 for 9 game in there. And every single look, it was against Detroit. Every single look was just like wide open. Yeah. Like, it wasn't like I was forcing shots. It was just, and you could tell. And when I went back and watched the game after it happened, I was like, dang, I was kind of wearing that. Like, I like my 6th, 7th, 8th miss. It was like, you could tell, like, it was bothering me for someone that didn't react as much after missed shots.
When you're shooting, I imagine you're in a slump. It's kind of in your head a little bit, right? Because I saw the other day, we were texting about Xavier Johnson. Like, he doesn't have a pretty shot to begin with, but that guy had no confidence. You can just tell, like, his form was off. He was like releasing it later. Like, Are you thinking that? Like, do you see that when you watch the film? Like, is anything different about how you're shooting it?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I noticed it. And Jacob Grandison that's what's kind of weird about his is it kind of looks like the same shot
I agree. That's
every
why
time.
I was worried about him as some of these other, like Luke Goody airballs one. DeMonte barely hits rim, right? Like Xavier Johnson was clanking it everywhere. Trent Frazier's airballing a shot like each game. Like that's what's concerning. Grandison just looks the same, looks like it's going in, and it just does.
Yeah, and I think that's why Plummer, you see him have these flashes where it's like, oh, he has a 2-game slump and then hits 6 threes, or oh, he has 2. And part of that's volume for sure. I've made the point, and I apologize if I've made this point before on this podcast, but I always tie it back to Kendrick Nunn. I probably made it on the film review. You've probably heard me say this multiple times. I watched Kendrick Nunn when he played at Oakland, and it dawned on me. I said, wow, he takes 14, 15 threes in a game. And he can start 1 for 7 in that game in the first half and finish, 7 for 14. And those 14 threes that he shoots in that game, he can shoot himself in and out of a slump in the same game. So there's no carryover most times. Whereas a guy like Jacob Grandison, if you're taking 3, if you're taking 2, and you go 0 for 2, and then you go 1 for 4, you're talking about stringing this over 4 games. That's a lot of time for that to marinate in between. So that's when I talk about the toughness element to it. And I'm not sitting here saying like, oh yeah, the second I had a bad shooting game, I figured it out the next game. I didn't. I was sitting there like, oh my God. And then you almost have to go back and see every shooter goes through this. 2016, 2017, Klay starts the season Klay Thompson, 3 for 28. Steph Curry, I mean, this was back in, I think it was 2016. He had a stretch in February that was like 3 for 31. Mm-hmm. And he's probably had something close to that this year. But the great shooters just, they don't start passing them up, because I think you want to say, okay, maybe we get somebody else involved, but you're telling yourself that you're not confident. And I think as much as you want to deny it or go, and like that's the mind control thing, I guess, that Jacob mentioned. And I think it's a real thing. It is like at first you're kind of in denial that you're in a slump, but I think everybody gets to a point when they're in a slump where they're like, oh, whatever, I'm in a slump. Like, let's just start shooting them again. But that's the difference, right? You still have to get back to your foundation, get back to your basics. You can't just start shooting it to shoot it. Like, I'm just gonna keep shooting them. Like, don't just take shots to take shots. Take shots with purpose. Take shots to make those shots. And man, the shooting slump's happening right now, but wouldn't it be great? Last 5 games going into March in the Big Ten tournament, this team starts to hit it again. That'd be perfect timing.
I think that's what we got to remember. Is this is a very small sample size of the season. Like, I will say, I had the stat here, Mike. First 13 games shot 40% from 3. Last 12 games, they're shooting 32% from 3. I know conference play, those numbers come down, right? Usually conference play threes, I looked this up, they're usually about down 1.5% from the overall season. So probably a couple percentage points from non-conference. Makes sense. Better defenses, better athletes, longer athletes. But I mean, that's a pretty big thing there. So I was going to ask Brad Underwood, I texted you, should I ask him about shooting? Because I don't know, like, if there's much you change about this. Like, how much does a coach have to toe the line of, all right, we need to find better shots, find a way to do better offense, or just, hey, our guys are going to shoot out of this. Like that's got to be, that's where I'm wondering, as a coach, do you try to do anything or just say, hey, keep shooting, guys?
Yeah, I think every coach does it differently. I remember specifically, I went to, my first summer at Wright State. For the 4 years I was at Illinois, the 3 that I played, there weren't a ton of like pressure situations and shooting. So like when I was there in the summer, I couldn't make a shot. Like my first summer at Wright State, it was like almost like, I think I'm gonna be a starter and I'm gonna be counted on. And it crippled me a little bit, and I couldn't make a shot in the summer. And Coach Nagy handles things a little bit differently than maybe some other coaches. I mean, he pretty bluntly just walked up to me and was like, you need to make shots. And I was just kind of like,
that's why you're here, kid.
Yeah, I was like, all right, yeah. And then it kind of clicks. And part of that too, I got to give a shout out to D Brown. He and I just, we just kind of broke it down there in August when I went home. He and I just 2-a-days for weeks before I went back to Wright State. And in those fall practices, I shot 58% from 3. And you just have to find a way to get back, but not, that was my problem as a player. And it's part of the reason why I probably didn't succeed as much as I wanted to at Illinois is I made it all too big.
Yeah.
Right. You can't make it too big, or you can't make it this big, like I'm a shooter and I got to, like, that's when you'll start continuing to miss. You just got to say, hey, this is what I work on every day. This is why I'm in here at 5:30 a.m. This is what I do. And just go and shoot it. And it sounds crazy. It sounds simple, but the more you start to overanalyze shooting, the further you're going to spiral into it. And you made the point about 40% to start the season, 32% since, 36% overall right now. I mean, it's usually something in the middle. Now, I do think that they are a better shooting team than 36% because they should have more quality looks with a guy like Kofi on the floor. But I think their biggest problem right now, when you're not getting a ton out of Andre Curbelo, then you're really struggling to find somebody who can get into the teeth of the defense and get things going for these guys around the arc. So a lot of contested threes last night, obviously, but some open ones. And I think the biggest telltale sign for me, Jacob Grandison hits a three to make it 33-27 to start the half. Next possession down, he passes up on a catch and shoot and then takes one dribble to his left, which we've seen him do. We've seen him do it a million times, like shot fake, little like low dribble and shoot it. Two guys went with Alfonso Plummer, or at least went towards Alfonso Plummer. He didn't shoot the one dribble. And then they start to recover to him. And then he throws it to Plummer. And then Plummer shoots a 19-foot fadeaway. So it's just, I don't know, good to grade. And I know, like, once you mention shooting, I go off on these tangents. Yeah. But, you know, I do think it all comes back to just simplifying it. Jeff Capel mentioned, like, Pitt couldn't shoot any free throws. Like, they were a terrible free throw shooting team at the beginning of the year. Then all of a sudden they were shooting like 80% as a team. And they were asking him in the media, like, what'd you do? And he's like, I just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
I just stopped talking about it. He's like, they shoot free throws every day after practice and whatever. Like, if the more you address it, it's just, it becomes bigger. But every coach does it differently, and every player processes it differently. So it can vary from person to person.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I got to follow up on two things. One, about Andre Curbelo. Two, what did D Brown do? Like, what did he tell you to get out of the shooting slump, or would you guys work on?
So the thing with D, and this is why, you know, even like the guys that are at UIC right now, I'm like, man, I hope they really realize what they have with him as a coach, because the one thing D would do, and it was just, you know, and I came to him like broken almost, really. Like, I was like, this is my 1 year. I didn't play as much as I wanted to at Illinois. This is my 1 year, and I want to make it right. And I got to be making shots, right? And I went to him, and he's like, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna do this, and every day, part of it, yes, it's the work, but he was just, you're a pro, man. You're a pro. No one shoots like you. No one shoots, and it's just, you start to kind of embody that. And we're doing drills. We do this Kobe drill where it's like, you shoot. Follow me here. It's 6 catch and shoot shots from the corner, from the wing, from the slot, which is kind of right down the lane line, from the top of the key, from the slot, from the wing, from the corner. But every single shot, you are running back to half court. And you have to make 6. So I think it ends up coming out to 36-ish made shots, and it's timed, and it's the Kobe drill. And I remember I finished it in whatever, like 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And he's like, I've never seen anything like that. Like, he just, you're a pro, man. And that's every day. And then I knew he wasn't BSing me because I saw it in the work. And then when I went back to Wright State, it was just, I kind of found who I was again. And he just kind of opened it up for me, where he breaks it all down, where he's like, hey, if you're a shooter, these are the places where you can find your shots. Okay. Like, don't think that you have, to do all this crazy stuff. Like, find 2 or 3 in transition a game, right? Find off your off ball movement in the half court. You're going to find a couple there. Right. And then when you get to the free throw line, that's 2 points. End of discussion. Like,
awesome. You
can shoot it, man. Like, he was incredible with that. And I owe him a lot. I really do owe him a lot for the season that I had at Wright State, because I came to him as pretty much a broken man.
It's awesome, man. The impact of a mentor like that.
He's amazing.
It's awesome. All right. I want to ask you about Andre Curbelo too. Clearly the guy who can break down a defense so easily, Mike. Like, and it's something that they missed to go get an easy one. Didn't shoot well. yesterday, of course, 1 for 6, only 2 points in 19 minutes. Got some really sloppy turnovers in the second half. But I did think he created some easy offense for himself. Didn't finish, but got Kofi an easy dunk, got Payne an easy dunk. How much, if you're Brad Underwood, you just kind of got to live with it right now? Because if you need him, like we've been talking about this for a while, like I think you need him to take the step you need to take. So what is the balance with that when you're chasing a Big Ten championship, but you also want to be your best version of yourself? Can you keep him under 20 minutes? And, because it feels like if he's playing 25, 30 minutes, maybe he can play through some of these mistakes, get the confidence he needs for the long run. But man, that's hard because sometimes he can really hurt you when he's turning it over like he does.
Rhythm is so important for a player. And a guy like him, it's amazing. You're waiting for him to string 2 games together, and I think the frustrating thing, and I'm sure it's the frustrating thing for him, forget all of us. It's more about the player anyways. And he's done it. Like he's done it. And he's a big reason you won a Big Ten tournament championship last year. He was a huge reason why you were 1 seed. Obviously Io and Kofi were outstanding. Trent, DeMonte, like everybody played their part. But what he offered off the bench, the reason why everyone was clamoring for him to start most of the year, because the bad starts they got off to. And then he came in and he was the change up, and I don't know what it is this year. We talk about the Marquette game, and I know he was battling injuries, and there's an element of trying to do too much. And I think there's an element too where, man, at this point, you're right. I mean, I do think you kind of have to ride with him in certain moments and let him just kind of play through it. He got yanked last night after a couple of his turnovers, and I get it. It is a really tough position for Andre Curbelo to be in, and it's a really tough position for this coaching staff to be in. Like Brad Underwood is in a tough spot. You got a preseason 3rd-team All-American guy that had a ton of expectations coming into this year, and there's certain moments where the team looks better or is functioning better when he's not in, but then when he's in, sometimes it looks about as easy as it can get for the Illinois offense outside of just throwing it deep into Kofi. So he came in, he was settled. He did against Northwestern, his first 2 plays, dribble, commit, kick to the corner, 3, comes in first offensive play, come off the ball screen, probe a little bit, lob to Payne. And then I don't know what it is. My dad made the comment last night, and I've made the comment before about Kofi, where it's like, just, you can't get bored with it. You can't get bored with it. Just, I know it's not going to be as flashy sometimes when you're coming off ball screens, and maybe you come off a ball screen and all you're doing is just throwing back to the other guard. But what that creates, right? It creates a long closeout, tack the feet, another guy commits. Now you're spraying it around. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Like last year, he really was. And then this year, I still get excited when he comes into the game. And for his sake, man, I really, really hope that he can figure this out and make it work within the minutes he has. And I'll be the first one to tell you, it's not easy, the situation that he's in. And like I said, for him or the coaching staff, because Trent has made major strides being very solid with the ball. So we'll see. I mean, you have 5 more conference games for the Big Ten tournament. And if he figures some things out, like he kind of did against Purdue, and you want to see the Purdue, you can't expect 20 points every single game from Andre Curbelo, but the Purdue patience that he had and the scoring ability, but also mixing that in with, hey, let me just try to get other guys involved. If he can tile that together, you're going to continue to hit your apex as an offense.
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing is like, it's only been 5 or 6 games, but we've been saying that for the entire season now. And that's been the frustrating part for him, for Brad, for everybody. But like, I get it. He's frustrating, man. Like he's really frustrating to watch right now. But at some point, do you almost got to sacrifice a game here in a Big Ten race? That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. But when there's bigger things ahead, I think it's just got to be really difficult. But I do think, Mike, I think it's fair that we've hit the point where does Brad Underwood have to consider some kind of lineup change, right? It's 3 games, but we've seen some issues shooting wise. We've seen RJ Melendez kind of take off. We've seen a little bit of positives from Coleman Hawkins. But obviously DeMonte and Jacob Grandison are struggling right now. What do you think goes into a potential lineup change? And do you think now would be the time? I don't know what that lineup change should be. Maybe it's as easy as Melendez over DeMonte Williams, like everybody wants, but like, what do you think all goes into that?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard for a staff because there's older guys, experienced guys. I'll take it back to my sophomore year and John Eakey and Joe Bertrand, 2 senior starters. Okay. And two different scenarios here. I mean, we had lost like 6 or 7 straight or whatever it was at the time. But, you go back, or actually I have it right here. We had lost 8 straight in January going into February. And then we make the change. We put in Kendrick Nunn and Malcolm Hill into the starting lineup, and credit Joe Bertrand and John Eakey. They were fantastic with it. 2 seniors that, careers were kind of getting close to the end in terms of college basketball. And they were great about it. And I whether it's Jacob Grandison, DeMonte Williams, whoever, if they do some lineup changes, you at least know you have mature guys that will get it. I do think if you're going to make a change, it's going to be one of 2 guys off the bench, and it's going to be one of 2 guys coming out of the starting lineup. I think you're either going to start RJ Melendez or Coleman Hawkins. I would lean more RJ Melendez because I still think what Coleman Hawkins can offer you off the bench in terms of just kind of a spark plug, passion, fire, running around, tipping balls around, getting balls in the glass. And then, it's Grandison or Williams. And I would probably lean more Grandison coming out of the starting lineup because you at least give him a different look. You bring him in with that second unit. He's a shooter off the bench, provides energy. Like, I think there's a way to make that work. And then the third element to it is if you do insert a guy like RJ Melendez into the starting lineup, a kid that already has a ton of confidence right now, it may be even more of a confidence boost. Kind of feeling like you're starting the game, you're immediately in the flow. I mean, all that is extremely important. And do you make that change in East Lansing? I don't know. Like, but when's the next good time, right? I think if you're going to do it, you got to do it. You see if it works, and then these guys are mature enough to be able to kind of go back and be like, all right, well, let's say if it didn't work out. But that's part of this thing right now with this team is you have a lot of talent, and you have a lot of depth, and injuries and illnesses have played a part in this. But man, we're in mid-February and we're still thinking about lineup, and but it's not uncommon. Teams make these switches. Jacob Grandison came into the starting lineup last year, and I'm not saying he was the only reason that they went on that 15-1 stretch, but it gave them a different look. And I think you can do a similar thing here. It just,
do you think do you think it's time for a lineup change? Do you think it needs to happen?
I do. I do. But if they didn't, I would also understand that. 2 older guys that, at times you're like, okay, do we do these wholesale changes? Or do we rely on our older, more experienced guys to just say, hey, we got to play with a little bit more toughness, and we got to knock down shots and compete on the glass. And, maybe they opt for more of that route, but it's going to be fascinating to see on Saturday who they roll out there because there's a lot of different possibilities.
What's it like on a team when you have a lineup change? I know you mentioned the Eakey stuff, but like, is that like a huge wake up call, or I don't want to say it can go in the opposite direction, maybe a panic, right? Like, hey, this isn't going well. All of a sudden, hey, we aren't as good as we thought.
Yeah, I think it all depends. Coaching staffs are usually really good with this, where when they do make the change, it's usually not one that shocks the team because they're there every day in practice. Like for us with Kendrick and Malcolm towards the end of that year, we were like, oh, okay. Yeah, and then when it happened, I think even to a degree, John and Joe both kind of like, yeah, these weren't 2 slouches. And John and Joe were good players too. So it was just, hey, Eakey and Bertrand were both guys that were just willing to do whatever for the team. They just wanted to win. And we went into Penn State, and Kendrick's the one that hits the corner 3 when it's like 56-55 to seal the game with 30 seconds left. So, and who knows? Could be a similar situation in East Lansing where I look at that closing group towards the end of that game, where you had Frazier, you had Melendez, you had Coleman Hawkins, you had DeMonte, and you had Kofi. Because you needed defense. So that's why Plummer wasn't in the game. A lot of ways you can go with it. So I guess we'll find out at 11 a.m. or maybe 10:40 a.m. on Saturday.
And I gotta say, it's kudos to RJ Melendez for making this a discussion, right? Like if he's not playing the way it is, we could sit there and go, Coleman gives you some length against a team like Michigan State. Maybe it just gives you more rebounding to start, maybe some better defense potentially if Granison sits. But it's kudos to Melendez, man. I know it was late. I know it was a little bit garbage time there, but man, he's taking advantage of this and he's got a boatload of confidence.
He does. And I think what he has to understand too as a freshman is 14 points against Northwestern, followed up 10 points against Rutgers. If you're getting beat off the dribble in the first half, you're sitting. All that stuff does not matter if you're not guarding. And I still got to figure out what the principles are defensively. It seems like they do force baseline a lot. He opened up his feet and Ron Harper got downhill. Omar Payne actually made a really good play on the ball. But, man, he's got to find a way. He's a good defender. He showed it. And it's part of the reason why if they do make this change, it's not going to be because of scoring. Scoring is probably going to be the third peg, right? It's going to be defense and it's going to be rebounding. And then, oh, yeah, by the way, he can make basketball plays. And he did that last night. So maybe that starting lineup boosts, and we're talking about it like it's already happening. It may not. But if it does happen, maybe that does give him a little bit of confidence to be like, okay, yeah, I belong. This isn't just like a weird kind of end of the game thing where I'm showing flashes. It's like, okay, it's here, it's now, and I got to help this team.
All right, Michigan State, a big one for either of these teams if they want to stay in the Big Ten title race. It's pretty amazing how close things are right now with Michigan State 9-5, Illinois 11-4. I mean, Rutgers now 10-5, Ohio State 9-4, Wisconsin 11-4, and Purdue atop the thing with 12-4. So with that loss at Rutgers, the win or the chance of Illinois, according to the metrics, to win a share of the Big Ten dropped 30% with what happened last night with Illinois losing and Purdue winning. But as I said earlier this week, you just kind of can't predict any of this, Mike. But this is, if you want to win a Big Ten title, you don't have much more margin for error, even in this kind of crazy Big Ten. So you're able to beat Michigan State without Curbelo and Coburn last time. What do you think of the matchup? What do you think the keys are to winning at a very tough place to play in East Lansing?
It's the same keys that they always are on the road, right? You got to compete on the glass. You gotta make shots, right? And your great players have to be great. It was kind of the same formula against Purdue, and this is a Michigan State team that is really, really struggling to score the basketball. Really struggling. I mean, even just kind of in their last 4 games, take out the Indiana game, but 58 against Penn State, 62 against Wisconsin, 63 against Rutgers. Even going back to the Illinois game where they had 55, they've struggled to score. And part of that is it reminds me a lot of that Wisconsin team last year. I know I've mentioned on this podcast before. I don't know where they're at role identification wise, and I don't think they do either. I think it's their Achilles heel right now. They don't really know who their go-to guy is. They have talent. So it's just kind of this, hey, let's figure it out every game type of thing. And for defenses, you can kind of just play straight up, and take certain things away. But I'm looking at Kofi where, against the Binghams of the world, the Kolokos of the world, he's struggled against some length. And I think he's eager to have a good showing against a guy like that who's, I don't know if he's leading the league in blocks right now. He's got to be right out there in the top 2 or 3. But you're going to need him. You're going to need Kofi. You're going to need to make free throws. That's another thing. You can't start 2 for 9 like you did against Rutgers, especially in big moments, right? Curbelo gets fouled, has a chance to cut it to 12, misses the free throws. Boston Serdonk misses 2 free throws. Kofi's missing free throws. You can't do that on the road and expect to win. So it's on the glass. It's knocking down shots. It's shooting them confidently first and foremost. And then it's just, it's Trent Frazier, it's Andre Curbelo, it's Kofi Coburn. We need good games out of you, all 3 of you. Can't just be 1 out of 3 or 1.5 out of the 3. It's got to be all three if you want to go into East Lansing and get a win.
Mike, it's going to be a heck of a finish here in the Big Ten. Just, let's see, 6 teams separated by 2 games with about 18 days left in this race. Thanks for the time as always, man. And if you haven't, check out the VIP film room we're about to do as well. Mike will break down what he saw in that Rutgers game. So, Mike, appreciate the time, man.
Appreciate it.